I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, a 5-year plan for high-quality growth. China bets big on technology to power its revival, but critics say that its economic miracle is over. So has China really stalled, or is it just shifting gears? From factories in Vietnam to markets in Europe, when China's economy slows, other nations feel it too. But as Beijing tries to reinvent its model, will it reshape the world economy or retreat from it? Donald Trump's tariffs are redrawing trade alliances. The balance of global power is on the line. Can China still overtake the American economy and lead in a world where the US is stepping back? China's economic miracle lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty and turned the nation into the factory of the world. For decades, Beijing powered spectacular growth through exports, infrastructure, and cheap credit. But that old model is running out of steam, even as it hits a record trade surplus with the world this year. The property sector is drowning in debt. Confidence is fading. Consumers are holding back. Now Beijing faces its toughest test yet: how to keep the world's second largest economy growing without relying much on the engines that once drove it. A new 5-year plan promises high-quality growth built on technology and self-reliance. But trade tensions with the US could make the climb even steeper. Katrina Yu reports from Beijing.
Zhang Shipu loved playing with robots as a kid. He never dreamed he'd one day run a Beijing-based company which creates customizable humanoid machines.
Why we want to build a robot like a human being is because we just want the humanoid robot just do the things for human. We want to create life partners for human beings.
In the space of 2 years, Zhang's firm has grown from 7 to around 200 employees. He credits the rapid growth to government support and investment into so-called frontier industries. And more could be on the way, with China's Communist Party outlining its priorities for the next 5 years at this week's plenum. The top-level gathering is set to announce a renewed focus on advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence, new energy, and biotechnology. The meeting comes at a critical time for Beijing. President Xi Jinping says the country is facing unprecedented challenges abroad, including trade tensions with the United States and its allies, and mounting restrictions on China's access to Western technologies.
His solution to that is to really focus on productivity. That's one of the reasons why innovation and technology are such high priorities for him. Partly it's to insulate Chinese supply chains from Western choke points, but it's also to try and overcome the really pressing problems that the Chinese economy faces.
Pressing problems including slowing growth, a prolonged property crisis, and weak consumer demand. Many people are worried about their livelihoods, and young people are facing the tightest job market in decades. At the plenum, leaders outlined plans to improve social welfare policies, but those benefits may not be felt in the short term. Some analysts say Beijing is making a calculated trade-off.
We have already seen this priority shifting to providing a better safety net, social safety net, in terms of pension coverage, the medical care coverage. But these coverage actually is at the cost of short-term growth.
For China's leaders, the priorities are clear. It isn't to stimulate short-term growth or provide relief to households under financial pressure. It's to invest in innovation and the industries Xi Jinping believes are crucial for the country's security. Keeping a tight grip on China's leadership is essential to Xi's ambitious plan. A record number of officials have been purged from Communist Party ranks in recent years, accused of corruption, a sign some believe of Xi Jinping's political strength rather than weakness. For Zhang Shipu, the politics matters less than policy. He's determined to help China win the race for technological dominance, one humanoid robot at a time. Katrina Yu for Counting the Cost, Beijing.
Let's take a look at some of China's previous five-year plans and how they impacted the global economy. Each one of them has reflected a new phase in the nation's transformation. Now, in the era of reform and opening up, China's leader Deng Xiaoping opened the nation up to the world and the free market. The 1981 five-year plan embodied this principle and saw China create free trading special economic zones, which attracted foreign investment. Now, some see this as the beginning of China as a global manufacturing hub. China's five-year plan in 2011 shifted the focus to strategic emerging industries. Those include green technology like electric vehicles and solar panels. The plan has laid the ground for Beijing's dominance in renewables and their global supply chains. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, part of the 2016-2020 plan was the Made in China 2025 project. Now, that has increased the move away from the manufacturing of cheaper goods towards high-tech quality ones. The current 2021-2025 plan doubled down on China's production of technology. It's now at the forefront of computing and AI and is reducing its reliance on American tech to challenge US dominance in the field. Well, to further discuss China's five-year plan, let's bring in our panel of guests. Joining us from Beijing is Huaya Wang. He's the president of the Center for China and Globalization and vice chairman of the China Association for International Economic Cooperation under the Ministry of Commerce. From Singapore, we're joined by Louise Liu. She's head of Asia Economics at Oxford Economics. And from Los Angeles, we're joined by William Li. He's chief economist at Milken Institute, a former IMF deputy division chief. A warm welcome to Counting the Cost to you all. Let's start with you, Huaya. How do you read China's New Year plan? Is this truly a shift towards innovation or simply a reworking of the old plan?
Well, thank you for this great program. I think that China's upcoming new five-year plan is really a paradigm shift. Basically, it's an upgrade of previous 5 years plan. So this year's five-year plan, they're going to emphasize more on new productive forces and also, of course, emphasize more domestic consumptions. And of course, they're also going to emphasize on the technological and scientific innovations. And basically, they're going to emphasize from high speed to high quality now. And also, they're going to be basically invest a lot into the this new frontier and technology like green power, like AI, like robots and things like that. But one of the key areas, I think the green globalization that China is leading now will be accelerated during this new five-year plan. But also, furthermore, I think there will be another greatly investment, there will be more trade, there will be more green promotion with the rest of the world. And also, furthermore, I think they're going to invest more on the education, on healthcare, on the social justice, security. So it's a bit overall, I think it's another upgrade of China's new development plan, and which is one 5 year after another 5 years. And this is really organized and we're coordinating a very look forward approach. So guided by that 5 year plan, I think all the region, all the province, all the municipalities, all the district have their own 5 year plan. So this is a great grand exercise that sharpened the focus, really develop the new objectives, and they're going to achieve new the target by the time of by 2030. So I think this is a great exercise and a great program that is installed for the next 5 years.
Let's bring in Louise. As an economist, what's your take on the five-year plan and the economic data? The slump in economic growth that China has experienced, is its economy in deep trouble?
I think the five-year plan is coming at a time where government officials might find that they are stuck within competing priorities. You're right. We've had a few months of pretty horrific data that's coming out of China by historical standards, and we think that because of that, there is really an increased focus and urgency on some of the initiatives that are supposed to be rolled out under the under the 5-year plan. So, we talk about how the 14th 5-year plan is one that's focused on high quality growth. The 15th 5-year plan may be an upgrade of that, but I think what it essentially is an acceleration of the targets and the ambitions that were already set in previous 5-year plans. And I think that the fact that the economy is much weaker now compared to what it was in the previous 5-year plan does suggest that there's a greater urgency to push through on maybe supporting domestic consumption, maybe ensuring that the technological frontier that China continues to challenge would continue to be pushed forward, supporting manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the 5-year plan and meetings around that are coming at a time where the economy is really not doing very well domestically. Exports is another story. China's exports have been much more resilient than we expected. But the focus is going to be on how policymakers are going to shore up domestic demand going forward in the next 5 years.
Okay, William, China's economy grew at its slowest pace in a year in the third quarter. Many nations would be happy with 5% growth, but for China, that's rather disappointing. Or is it? Is it still considered realistic, or is it an over-ambitious target? What's your opinion on the state of the economy, given that China hasn't yet succeeded in tackling the structural problems in its economy? What do you make of the 5-year plan?
Well, Adrian, the 5-year plan that we think is going to be put in place now is doubling down on both the good and the bad of the previous 5-year plan. We see that China really has successfully become the manufacturing behemoth of the world, and now that it still needs to grow itself because the domestic demand has been so pathetic. The need to double up on exports means that the rest of the world is going to have to absorb the excess production out of China. So when you said earlier that when China starts to change its production, the rest of the world feels it. Right now, the rest of the world is somewhat trembling over the fact that it's going to have to absorb yet more Chinese exports. And within the Chinese economy, domestic consumers are not getting enough income and feel safe enough about their future and their Social Security and retirement that they all are excessively saving rather than consuming. Consumption in China right now is 40% of GDP compared to 70 or 60% in the rest of the world. So China really has a lot of imbalances right now, and the new 5-year plan has to make a lot of changes to the previous era in order to correct the income imbalances, the regional imbalances, and the production imbalances, where we see companies that are just engaged in massive competition to try to knock each other out. So there are managerial governance issues within China, and dealing with the imbalance that have come from the era of rapid growth is something that the planners are going to have to do in the future.
What do you make of what William was saying there? China's factories, of course, kept the country on track to reach this year's growth target, powered by the exports that Louise was talking about there. Can China sustain all of that while it's facing a trade war with the US?
Well, I think this 5-year plan is actually another upgrade of China manufacturing, and I think more so probably consolidate the synchronizing power of China. For example, China has 70% of global speed railway, 60% to 70% 5G system, and all those biggest production of EV, of the green product to offer the world, and the green globalization that China has proposed for the 21st century. But furthermore, I think China is willing to invest globally, like what Japanese did in the 80s and 90s, so that Chinese can set manufacturers centers in different parts of the world, including US and Europe, so that they can create local jobs and generate the revenues, and of course also softening those trade tariffs. So those are the things that we need a stable global environment, and we need a more friendly geo-economic environment. Otherwise, China would be a supply and value chain center for the world, because out of the 10 largest container ports, 7 of them are in China, and plus on top of that, China generates about 30 million college graduates each year. So this synergy of China that working very effectively for the world is really going to take place. But I think, there's three phases of China's opening up. In the 80s and 90s, China was in China for China, the business company in China. In the 90s and 2000, it was in China for the world. China became a manufacturing center of the world. But now this century from 2021, for the next 5 years, China will be in the world for the world. So I think that era is coming. China is going to massively invest around the world, and then that's going to solve all those complaints and problems, and Chinese company will be welcomed everywhere, including the BRICS countries, especially. So I think this, let's generate a more friendly geopolitical environment. That's the most important thing we need to do, rather than competition, sanctions, trade war, and of course all those tariffs escalating on each other. So we need a peaceful, stable environment, like Rubio, Secretary Rubio said, let's create a strategic stability between the U.S. and China, and then that's really what we want, and then that can benefit the world.
Louise, what do you make of that? Does either side, the US or China, have the upper hand in this trade war right now? Could a meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump help to address the structural differences between the two economies, or are they too deeply embedded?
Well, I think they're too deeply embedded. I think there are a lot of structural differences between both sides that cannot really be solved by a trade deal or by rounds of negotiations. But having said that, obviously, the fact that both presidents are actually meeting after the saber settle, the kind of rattling from both sides in the last month or so, the fact that both sides are meeting at the end of this month, potentially at the sidelines of in Korea, is a positive off-ramp, and that could ease tensions at a time when investors are really looking for a bit of a stabilization in U.S.-China relations. Now, having said that, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods are likely going to stay where they are, 30%, 40% on an effective basis. That's going to be punitive for Chinese manufacturers that are directly shipping into the U.S. But I do agree with William, right? The resilience of Chinese exports, and this is where I think Chinese manufacturers and China in general have the upper hand, in that the resilience of their exports is really centered on the fact that Chinese manufacturers are embedding themselves in global supply chains much more than they were 10 years ago. So you think about Chinese manufacturers providing inputs or intermediate goods into global supply chains, into Asia supply chains. That's not something that you can easily disassociate yourself with or decouple from. And so we think that China has the upper hand, in that it's being so entrenched in global supply chains that the U.S. just can't really do much about it. And at the end story of that might just be that the U.S. consumer might have to actually absorb some of these higher costs that's coming from U.S. tariffs. Right. So in a trade environment, I would say that China is going in with a stronger hand. Okay,
I can see William shaking his head. He disagrees with that assessment. William, why? I mean, are Donald Trump's tariffs actually working as intended? How much of a trump card, if you like, are rare earth minerals? To what extent is China holding the US hostage economically at the moment?
Louise is describing the world as it is, which is that China is the major manufacturing supply center of the world, and it's mainly having to export. But I think what Mr. Wong has just described is the world that both Donald Trump and President Xi want, which is a movement not of goods and services, but a factor of production, capital moving from country to country, investing in Europe, say, to produce more automobiles within Europe, employing more European workers. That's the world that both President Xi and Donald Trump want. And in fact, when you say Donald Trump's tariff policies, I think I would really ask you to reread his policy pamphlets again and see that he has investment policies. He has said we're reducing the size of government, we're lowering taxes, we're having fewer regulations so that foreign investors can invest in the United States, and we will give you, to protect your investments and the extra jobs that you're creating in the United States, a tariff barrier to protect you from unfair competition. So the emphasis of President Trump's policies has been invest in the United States. And that's exactly what Mr. Wong just said. China wants to invest, but somehow it has not gone to do that. It has really gone to produce more goods and services to dump into the rest of the world. Now, granted, the Belt and Road countries and some of the countries in Eastern Europe have been recipients of capital, and they have really built a lot of car factories. But the car factories are not to be sold within Eastern Europe; they're to be sold in Western Europe, and that's where the EU is resisting. And similarly, in the United States, we're trying to have more safe and sounder supply chains that don't depend on China for critical pharmaceuticals and critical rare earths. But at the same time, China says, "Oh, but if you use any of our technologies, we're going to have to license you first and be the controller of who gets access to that technology." So not only can the West not accept, not only does the West not receive investments from China, China's going out of the way to make it more difficult to use the advances that China has produced in the production of stuff in the rest of the world.
Well, let's put that to Mr. Wang. What do you make of that? What is China's strategy to insulate itself from the trade war, first and foremost? And will President Xi throw real policy weight behind his plans to rebalance the economy towards domestic consumption, the shift that could address years of trade imbalances that have hollowed out manufacturing around the rest of the world?
Well, I don't think so. Actually, I think that, China was the first victim of this U.S. trade war started with his first term of Trump 9 years ago. I mean, but China become much more resilient now. China becomes more, really the only country stand up against this kind of bully. And but also you can see that after all those years China development, China has been sanctioned for 9 years now. And then for the first time, China re-sanctioned back. And then so the first time for the U.S. to become a receiving end of this tariff and sanction that they've been practicing for over years. And then so they see the war is not functioning like that. We cannot sanction each other. So I'm sure the summit is going to happen in Kuala Lumpur and the end of the month in Korea would probably soften this both camps, because now we are in each other's shoes now. We perfectly understand the condition, the feeling, and then the agonizing process we're going through. So I think China and the U.S. as being the two largest economy in the world, has the moral responsibility to safeguard the global market and things like that, and the prosperity for the world, and also peace, making peace in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Korea, in everywhere. So from that point of view, I think that the U.S. now realize, it may not be a good policy to really hammering and keep sanction China. China can sanction back, so which is going to hurt the U.S. and hurt everybody else. So that's not really good. And now we have to talk, calm down. I think there's also some negotiation, bargaining chip there, but I think now it's time that we come to the real stability. And like Rubio mentioned, we need to seek the strategic stability rather than strategic rivalry. I think that's probably the right way to go. And then really for that, I think China and the U.S. has to realize, we have to work together.
Louise, I'll come to you in just a moment, but I saw William grinning broadly there. Do you want to come back on that?
Well, I just absolutely agree with everything Mr. Wang says. It's unfortunate that the negotiators, right, they say those words, but the policies, actions that are taken at home belie that. You cannot say we want to negotiate shared technologies and make the world better off and be able to have everyone benefit. At the same time, sanction the whole world against the use of technology. Now, the U.S. licensing technology has been targeted towards strategic industries, dual-use products that could be used for military purposes, and it's specifically targeted to certain countries. The licensing agreement that China has put in place has been to require that the entire world, right, be subject to that kind of sanction. So U.S. has been very targeted and strategic, and China has been trying to keep its monopoly on the technologies that it has been so successful in developing.
William, the China model is often criticized in the West. Could it, though, that criticism be underestimating China's resilience and strength, taking into consideration its global reach, particularly in the global South, as well as in some European nations, which are clearly now reorienting towards the East?
There's a lot to be said for China's model. It is a hybrid model that has been adapting. Just to think about the historic reach it's had from a central planning style, originally the Soviet-based, to Deng Xiaoping's experiment with market economy, and then the withdrawal from the experimentation of market economy toward the more directed model that President Xi has put in place. I think the criticism have been that there was not enough feedback from the markets toward adapting the production and the tactics, the implementation of the strategies. Central planning has always suffered from the inability to shift rapidly as conditions change and to self-correct the excess production that has taken place and the insufficient consumption that you see in the economy. So I think the ability of China's to adapt its model has been really historic and really something to be applauded. But unfortunately, the speed with which it can do that is limited by the amount of central control, which actually has increased with President Xi over the years rather than decreased to allow more flexibility from the markets.
Louise, could China's economy overtake that of the US within the next decade, do you think? Will it become the world's leading economy, or is that moment past?
Well, we think that eventually there will be convergence. That won't happen in the next 10 years, maybe 20 years. But that's really predicated on the fact that we are seeing productivity increases in the US that's really supporting growth momentum there. You know, the US exceptionalist story might continue for a little bit longer. China, on the other hand, have got domestic issues, domestic structural issues that needs to work through. And like any car that's turning direction, you are bound to slow down a little bit before you can actually speed up on a path ahead. So I think there is going to be convergence just because of China's efficiency gains across some of its initial investments in advanced manufacturing, for instance. But by and large, that's still going to be something that's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 decades even.
Okay, Huayo, we've got about a minute and a half left on our discussion. China versus the USA. Who will lead the global economy, do you think? What would leading the world look like for China? Is that its ambition? Is it more interested in economic dominance or strategic partnerships?
Well, I think this will be just evolve naturally. I think China has developed for the last 47 years since opened up a really hybrid economy. You have 60% of private sectors, 20% SOE, another 20% multinational. It's a trilateral economy that you are not seeing anywhere in the world. It's very stable. Like private sector generates 60% of the revenues, taxes, and 80% of the economy, employment, and SOE, does all the dirty jobs and all the key sectors, and multinational does 1/3 of Chinese export. So you see that kind of experiment, that kind of model, I think it's probably going to have some application for other countries. You have the stability, you have the private sector, resilient and vibrant enough. You have multinational that supports the global trade. So I think the system that China-US.
Okay.
You have to fit in its own domestic situation. China has a 2,000 years history. No, China has 5,000 years history. That that model reflects the long government intervention, central government strong planning.
I'm sorry to jump in. I'm sorry, I've got to jump in because we are out of time. I mean, there's so much more to discuss on this topic, and it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for being with us today. Huayo Wang, Louise Liu, and William Li. And thank you for being with us. That's our show for this week. If you'd like to comment on our discussion, I'm at A. Finnegan on X. Try to remember to use the hashtag AJCTC, please. Or you could drop us a line, countingthecost@aljazeera.net, our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire editions for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.